Every morning at 7:30 a.m. sharp, the little bell above the door of Evelyn's Corner Café let out a soft chime. The staff barely looked up anymore. They already knew who it was. Thomas Granger, 83 years old, thin-framed and sharp-eyed despite the years, stepped inside the café with quiet precision. He wore the same olive-green field jacket every morning, with the outline of a faded 101st Airborne patch barely visible on one shoulder. On his head, a tan cap, bent, worn, and dusty, sat firmly, shading a forehead lined by decades. He walked slowly, but upright, always upright. His destination never changed, Table 4, tucked in the corner beside the window. From there, he could see the sidewalk, the street lamp, and the quiet rhythm of the town waking up. He ordered the same thing each time, black coffee, 2 slices of dry toast, and nothing else. Thomas didn't come for company. In fact, the other patrons often forgot he was even there. He didn't speak unless spoken to. The servers, especially the younger ones, referred to him in whispers as the quiet guy with the military hat. They didn't know his name, and he never offered it. But if you watched him closely, you'd see patterns, habits born from years of ritual. He'd sit down, rest his cane gently against the side of the booth, place a folded napkin across his lap and glance, just once, at the empty seat across from him. He never looked at it for long, just a fleeting moment, like muscle memory. Then his eyes would shift out the window. He stirred his coffee 3 times precisely, always counterclockwise. He didn't need sugar or cream. He liked it bitter, real, like life had been. To most people in the café, Thomas was just another elderly man, invisible in the rush of daily routines. But there was something about the way he held himself, shoulders still square, gaze still sharp, that hinted at a past deeper than anyone cared to ask about. The café buzzed with normalcy. The hiss of espresso machines, clinking dishes, the hum of conversation. But at table 4, there was only silence, and one man staring out into the morning with 1,000 memories behind his eyes. And though no one ever sat across from him, there was always a second napkin folded neatly on the other side of the table, waiting. The morning carried on as usual. Newspapers rustled, coffee cups clinked, forks tapped against plates, as the world outside Evelyn's Corner Café moved faster than anyone inside wanted it to. But even in the comfort of that warm little shop, Thomas Granger remained apart, present, but not part of it. Across the room, a young couple giggled over their phones, sharing memes and whispers. At the counter, a group of construction workers cracked jokes, their laughter echoing above the gentle hum of the espresso machine. A mother helped her toddler into a booster seat, all while typing furiously on her phone. No one looked at Thomas, not out of cruelty, out of habit. He had become like wallpaper, visible, but never seen. When Jenny, one of the newer servers, passed by his table with a full tray of lattes, she didn't notice his hand rise gently for her attention. By the time she returned, the moment had passed. Thomas simply lowered his hand and resumed stirring his coffee slowly. From the outside, it looked like nothing, but inside, something tugged. He glanced again at the seat across from him, where a second cup once stood. That place had belonged to Martha, his wife of 42 years. She had loved this cafe. The old wood floors, the cinnamon smell, the soft jazz on low volume. Every Sunday morning they sat at table 4 and talked about everything: their children, their travels, her favorite books. But Martha was gone now. Cancer had taken her 2 years ago. Thomas never stopped coming. Some said he was clinging to the past. Others didn't say anything at all. They were too busy, or maybe too afraid to ask. On this morning, Thomas reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a photo. He always did this when the cafe got too loud. It grounded him. The picture was faded and creased from decades of folding. It showed a young man in uniform, him, standing next to a woman in a floral dress, both smiling under a banner that read, "Welcome Home." He stared at it for a while, as if waiting for something to move, then carefully tucked it back into his jacket. As he returned to his coffee, he noticed something: a small silver spoon beside his cup, the kind Martha always preferred to use. The staff didn't usually leave it out anymore. Perhaps someone remembered, or perhaps it had simply been a mistake. Either way, it made his chest tighten. And just like that, the day returned to normal. Jenny walked by again, this time slower, glancing down at the empty plate. "Would you like more toast, sir?" Thomas offered a quiet smile. "No, thank you." She nodded and moved on. The interaction lasted 3 seconds, but to Thomas it was the most anyone had said to him all morning. As he lifted his cup for another sip, he didn't notice the figure watching him from across the room. A man in his early 30s, seated alone near the window, holding a coffee in both hands, eyes fixed, not out of curiosity but quiet recognition. He didn't interrupt. He just waited, because sometimes kindness doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks in quietly and pays attention. The breakfast crowd began to thin. The young couple had left with a flurry of giggles and take-out cups. The construction crew headed out, boots clunking against the old wood floor. Only a few regulars remained. Thomas Granger folded his napkin and laid it precisely next to his empty cup. He reached into his coat, pulled out his worn leather wallet, and slowly slid a few bills onto the corner of the table just as he always did. He was about to stand when Jenny approached his table, holding something small in her hand. "I'm sorry, sir," she said gently, "but someone already took care of your bill." Thomas blinked. "I beg your pardon?" She smiled. "It's been paid. They also left this for you." She handed him a small piece of folded receipt paper. Tucked inside was a handwritten note in clean, blocky lettering. Thomas unfolded it carefully. His hands trembled, not from age but from something else. Something rising in his chest he hadn't felt in years. The note read, "Thank you for your service. You are not forgotten." a grateful stranger. He stared at the words. The cafe faded, the hum of conversations, the scraping of plates, the distant music, all melted into silence. For a moment, it was just him and the words on the page. He looked up, searching. "Who?" he asked Jenny softly. She shrugged. "I'm not sure, sir. They paid quietly and left before I even got a name." Thomas's gaze swept the room. Near the window, the man from earlier, the one in his 30s, calm and watchful, was gone. His cup sat empty on the table, still warm, the chair pushed back, a quiet exit. Thomas read the note again. His eyes misted. His hand moved to his chest, gently brushing against the bronze star he always kept pinned inside his coat beneath the outer flap. Few knew it was there, fewer cared. Until now. The note wasn't long, it wasn't dramatic. But in those simple words, something deep had been restored. He was not invisible. He was remembered. He folded the note with reverence and placed it into the same inside pocket where the old photo of Martha lived. For the first time in years, he placed something beside her memory, something new, something hopeful. He looked at Jenny and nodded. "Would you tell whoever did this? Thank you?" She smiled kindly. "I think they already know." Thomas stood slower than before, but straighter. As he reached for his cane, he paused. Then did something he hadn't done in a long time. He walked over to the counter. "Excuse me," he said, voice firm but warm. "Could I speak to the owner?" A minute later, Evelyn herself appeared, apron on, hair in a bun, eyes soft with recognition. "Mr. Granger," she said warmly. "Everything all right?" He looked around the cafe, then back at her. "You got a good place here." She looked touched. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "Next time someone in uniform walks in, any uniform, put their coffee on me." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Consider it done." As Thomas walked out the door, the little bell chimed again, but this time a few heads turned. Jenny smiled. Evelyn followed him with her eyes. And back at table 4, an empty coffee cup remained, along with a ripple of something unseen. Respect. Gratitude. Legacy. That day, Thomas didn't just leave the cafe. He carried something with him, something small but powerful. A folded note in his coat, and the quiet assurance that, after all this time, someone still remembered. The next morning, Thomas Granger returned to Evelyn's corner cafe just as he always did. Same jacket, same cap, same cane. But something had changed. Not in the way he walked, not in his pace or posture, but in his presence. There was a softness behind his eyes that hadn't been there in years, like something dormant had been stirred. When he entered, the bell above the door chimed again, but this time Jenny looked up and smiled immediately. "Good morning, Mr. Granger." He gave a nod and walked to table 4. But instead of finding it bare as usual, a fresh cup of black coffee was already waiting for him, still steaming, placed carefully on a saucer. Jenny followed behind with a quiet grin. "It's on the house today. Evelyn's orders." Thomas blinked. "Why?" She shrugged. "You started something." As he settled into his seat, he noticed something new on the corner of the table. A small placard, made from dark wood, with gold letters carved into it. "Reserved for those who served." His throat tightened. He picked up the coffee slowly and held it close, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. As the cafe filled with the late morning rush, things felt different. People still chatted, phones still buzzed, but now eyes met his, brief nods, quiet acknowledgments. At the table beside his, a man in a business suit leaned over. "Excuse me, are you Thomas Granger?" Thomas looked up, cautious. "Yes." The man extended a hand. "My dad served with the 101st in Vietnam. Said there was a guy in his unit who dragged him out under fire. Always said he never got to thank him." Thomas froze. "What was your father's name?" he asked. "Michael Harlan." Thomas sat back, stunned. "Harlan. I remember him. Took a bullet to the leg. Would have bled out if someone hadn't carried him 2 miles through jungle," the man finished. "That was you, wasn't it?" Thomas didn't answer. He didn't have to. The man nodded again. "Thank you." As the day went on, more quiet acknowledgments followed. A high school student approached nervously and asked to take a photo. A young woman left a sticky note at the table. "My grandfather was a veteran, too. You remind me of him." Thomas said little, but his eyes said everything. That afternoon, as he rose to leave, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the note from the day before, the one the stranger had left. He unfolded it, read it again, then placed it gently back with the photo of Martha. Just as he reached the door, he turned to Jenny. "Next time someone walks in wearing a uniform," he said, "tell them breakfast is covered." She smiled. "By you?" He smiled back. "By all of us." Then he stepped into the sunlight, and behind him, table 4 wasn't just a table anymore. It had become a reminder that one act of kindness can echo far beyond the moment it's given. The following Sunday, Evelyn's Corner Café was unusually quiet for a weekend. The morning sun streamed through the tall front windows, casting long shadows across the wood-paneled floor. The same soft jazz played in the background, and the familiar smell of cinnamon and strong coffee lingered in the air. At table 4, a hot cup of black coffee sat untouched. Thomas Granger hadn't arrived yet, but this time everyone noticed. Jenny checked the clock more than once. Evelyn looked toward the door between orders. Even the regulars paused between bites to glance toward the empty corner of the cafe. And then, at exactly 7:30 a.m., the bell above the door gave its gentle ring. Thomas entered slowly, holding a folded newspaper under one arm and his cane in the other. His step was measured, but today something felt different, lighter, steadier. When he reached his usual table, he paused. The small wooden plaque that read, "Reserved for those who served," was still in place. But now, beside his coffee cup, there was something new. A folded note with handwriting that didn't belong to anyone on the staff. Thomas sat down, unfolded it, and read, "You remind me of my father. He never liked to talk about his service, but I know it shaped everything he was. Thank you for reminding us not to forget. A stranger whose life you touched." He folded the note slowly and placed it beside the first one in his pocket, next to Martha's photo. He didn't cry, but the corner of his mouth lifted ever so slightly. Before he left that morning, Thomas scribbled something on the back of his receipt. Jenny noticed it only after clearing the table. It read, "For the next one who wears the uniform, coffee's on me." She smiled and passed the message to Evelyn, who quietly framed it and placed it under the plaque at table 4. Weeks passed, then months. Thomas still came, less quietly now, often greeted by name. Veterans from nearby towns began visiting the cafe, each sitting at table 4 at least once, often with tears in their eyes or quiet stories of their own. Some left notes. Others left patches, photos, medals, but all of them left something behind.